She's deaf. We can't raise a broken child, my husband said about our newborn daughter. My mother-in-law yelled, we should put her up for adoption. There's nothing you can do. I walked away and spent years learning sign language and looking for her everywhere. Well, everyone thought I'd stopped searching. Then one day, the hospital room reeked of antiseptic, but all I could smell was the bitter scent of broken promises. I held my brand new baby daughter against my chest, counting her tiny fingers, trying to memorize the perfect curve of her ears, when my whole world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Meredith, you need to be realistic about this situation. My husband, Travis, stood with his back to me, rigid, refusing to even glance at our child. That morning, the doctor had delivered the diagnosis: profound bilateral sensorineural hearing loss. Our daughter was deaf. I pressed my lips to her soft forehead, breathing in that intoxicating newborn smell. She's perfect, Travis. She's our daughter. He finally turned, and the coldness in his eyes made me flinch. She's damaged. How are we supposed to raise a child who can't hear? Do you have any idea what that means? The special schools, the medical bills, the constant doctor appointments. My voice cracked as I clutched her tighter. She's 3 days old. She's not damaged. She just experiences the world differently. Just then, the door burst open. Constance, Travis's mother, swept in like a hurricane. Travis had apparently already informed her. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide with what I can only describe as disgust. This is unacceptable, she announced, pointing at my baby like she was a piece of defective furniture. Travis, I raised you better than this. You cannot saddle yourself with this burden. We need to give her up for adoption. There are facilities for these types of children. My arms tightened protectively around my daughter. Excuse me, Constance, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but laced with a new, raw strength. Her perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up. Get out of this room. Now. Something primal had awakened in me, a fierce protective instinct I'd never felt before. Travis stepped forward, his jaw clenched. Mom's right, Meredith. We need to consider all our options. There are families who specialize in special needs children, people who are equipped for this. I looked between them, these two people I thought I knew. Travis and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3. I'd loved him completely, trusted him with my whole heart. His mother had always been cold, controlling, but I tolerated her for his sake. She's not an option to consider. She's our daughter. Constance actually laughed. A cold, dismissive sound. And what exactly do you plan to do? You can't even support yourself without Travis. You're a part-time bookkeeper at a dental office. You think you can handle a deaf child alone? There's nothing you can do for her that an adoptive family couldn't do better. The nurse who had been monitoring my vitals cleared her throat awkwardly. Perhaps this conversation should continue in private. We're done here, I said, my voice steady despite the tears now streaming down my face. Travis, you need to make a choice right now. Your daughter or your mother's approval. Because I'm keeping her with or without you. He didn't hesitate. That's what broke me most. He didn't even pause to think. I can't do this, Meredith. I'm sorry, but I just can't. 2 hours later, after I'd refused to sign adoption papers 3 times, Travis and Constance left. They just walked out of the hospital, as if our daughter and I didn't exist. The nurse, an older woman named Patricia, squeezed my shoulder as I sobbed. What's her name? She asked softly. I looked down at my sleeping baby, this perfect little person who deserved so much better than the hand she'd been dealt. Ruby. Ruby Mewalis. Patricia smiled. That's beautiful. And Meredith, you're going to be an amazing mother to her. I wanted to believe her, but fear was eating me alive. I'd never been particularly strong. I'd always leaned on Travis for big decisions, let him take the lead. I worked part-time because he preferred I be home to cook dinner. My savings account held maybe $1,500. How was I supposed to do this alone? The hospital's social worker, Loretta Washington, visited me the next day. 50-ish, kind eyes, a no-nonsense demeanor. She laid out the reality plainly. The state provides early intervention services, but you'll need to navigate a lot of bureaucracy. You'll need health insurance, which you probably lost when Travis filed for divorce. My head snapped up. Yes, he already filed this morning. You'll need housing, childcare, and most importantly, you'll need to learn American Sign Language if you want to communicate with your daughter effectively. My head was spinning. Travis had already filed for divorce. We'd been married 3 years. Our daughter was 4 days old. I'll do whatever it takes, I whispered. Just tell me where to start. Loretta studied me for a long moment. I believe you. But you should know, the father is already pushing hard for adoption proceedings. His lawyer contacted our office this morning, claiming you're unfit due to financial instability. They're claiming it's in the child's best interest. Ice flooded my veins. Can they do that? Can they take her from me? Not easily, but they can make your life very difficult. You need a lawyer. I can recommend someone who does pro bono family law cases. She handed me a card. Nathaniel Griffin. Tell him I sent you. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. I moved into a tiny studio apartment that barely fit Ruby's crib and my mattress on the floor. Travis fought me on everything. He wanted 0 custody, but also wanted to control whether I kept Ruby at all. His lawyer argued I was unstable, financially incapable, living in substandard conditions. Nathaniel Griffin turned out to be my guardian angel. He was a 60-year-old African-American man with long dreadlocks and a passion for defending underdogs. He took my case for free after hearing my story. Travis and his mother want her gone, but they don't want to look like the bad guys, he explained during our first meeting. They're trying to paint you as incompetent, so a judge will decide adoption is in Ruby's best interest. We're not going to let that happen. He was true to his word. During those months, while fighting Travis in court, I threw myself into learning everything I could about raising a deaf child. I enrolled in ASL classes at the community college, studying signs until my hands cramped. I attended every early intervention appointment, worked with audiologists and speech therapists, researched cochlear implants and deaf culture. My mother, Leslie, tried to be supportive, though her discomfort was obvious. Maybe Travis has a point about your living situation, honey. That apartment is so small. My father, Glenn, was more direct. You're being stubborn. That baby needs stability, and you're barely keeping your head above water. Even my younger brother, Austin, suggested I think about what's best for Ruby, as if keeping her with her mother wasn't obviously what was best. But my grandmother, my dad's mother, Virginia, was different. She was 83 years old, sharp as a tack, and she drove 3 hours to visit me in that cramped studio apartment. Your grandfather was hard of hearing from the war, she told me, holding Ruby gently. People treated him like he was stupid, like he couldn't understand. But he was brilliant. Ran a successful hardware store for 40 years. This baby doesn't need to hear to be extraordinary. She just needs someone to believe in her. I cried into her shoulder while she stroked my hair. I'm so scared I'm not enough for her. Fear means you care, she said, her voice soft but firm. Indifference is what would make you a bad mother. That husband of yours, he showed indifference. You're showing up every single day. That's what matters. The court battle lasted 7 months. Travis and Constance brought out every dirty tactic. They claimed I was mentally unstable, that I'd threatened to harm myself and Ruby, that I was living in squalor. All lies, but lies that had to be disproven with evidence and testimonies. During the final hearing, the judge asked me directly why I thought I could provide better care than an adoptive family specifically trained in special needs. I looked at Ruby, who was 9 months old and sitting in Nathaniel's assistant's lap. She was babbling in baby sounds, her big brown eyes curious about everything around her. Because I'm her mother, I said simply. And I love her more than life itself. I've already learned intermediate ASL. I've connected with the deaf community. I've researched schools and programs. But most importantly, I wake up every morning determined to give her the best life possible. No adoptive family will fight for her the way I will, because no one else will love her the way I do. The judge awarded me full custody. Travis signed away his parental rights the same day, wanting nothing to do with Ruby. His mother tried to appeal, claiming grandparents' rights, but Nathaniel shut that down quickly. I thought we were safe. I thought the hardest part was over. I was so wrong. 2 months after the custody hearing, on a rainy Tuesday morning, I dropped Ruby off at the developmental daycare that had accepted her. She was 11 months old, chunky and happy, learning baby sign language from the specialized teachers there. I kissed her goodbye, signed "I love you" against her palm, her favorite, and went to work. When I came back at 5:30, the daycare director met me at the door, her face pale. "Meredith, Ruby's not here." The world tilted. "What do you mean she's not here?" A woman came at 2 o'clock with paperwork claiming to be her grandmother with temporary custody documents. Everything looked legitimate. We called the number on file to verify and a man confirmed it was approved. We gave Ruby to her. I couldn't breathe. What woman? What paperwork? She said her name was Constance Wallace. She had a driver's license, court documents with a judge's signature. I was already running to my car, phone pressed to my ear, calling Nathaniel. He answered on the second ring. "Constance took Ruby." I gasped out. The daycare gave her to Constance. They had fake documents. "Call the police," he yelled back. "No. I'm heading to the courthouse to get an emergency order." The next 72 hours were an absolute nightmare. The police treated it as a custody dispute initially, which delayed everything. Constance had disappeared. Her house was empty. Her car gone. Travis claimed he knew nothing. But I could see the lie in his eyes when police questioned him. She took her for adoption, he finally admitted during the third interview. She has connections with a private adoption agency. She said it was for the best. "Where is Ruby?" I screamed at him, Nathaniel holding me back from lunging across the police station. "Where's your mother?" "I don't know. She didn't tell me details. She said it was better that way." Private adoption agencies, I learned, operated in murky legal waters. Some legitimate, some serving as fronts for buying and selling babies to desperate couples. With falsified documents and a child who needed special placement, Constance could disappear Ruby into the system. The police investigation crawled forward. Every day without Ruby felt like drowning. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My milk still came in. I'd been nursing her until recently, and the physical pain matched my emotional agony. Nathaniel worked around the clock, filing emergency motions, contacting every adoption agency in 3 states. He hired a private investigator named Frank Delgado, a retired FBI agent who specialized in parental abduction cases. "These private placements move fast," Frank explained. "If Constance has connections, Ruby could already be with an adoptive family who thinks everything is legitimate. We need to move faster." My mother visited me during this time, found me on the floor of my apartment, staring at Ruby's empty crib. "Sweetheart, you need to eat something." "My baby is gone," I whispered. "Someone has my baby, and I don't know if they know how to sign to her. She won't understand why I'm not there. She'll think I abandoned her." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We're going to find her. I promise you." But weeks turned into months. Frank traced Constance to a motel in Pennsylvania, but she'd left days before they arrived. Travis, under police pressure, admitted his mother had mentioned something about a family in Vermont, but the lead went nowhere. 6 months after Ruby disappeared, the investigation stalled. The FBI was involved, but without concrete evidence of which agency Constance used or where Ruby ended up, they had limited resources to continue. Travis and Constance were arrested for kidnapping and falsifying documents. Constance remained silent, her lawyer arguing she believed she was acting in Ruby's best interest. Travis got 3 years probation. Constance got 18 months in minimum security prison and served 9. But Ruby was still gone. Nathaniel sat me down in his office 1 year after she vanished. I'd aged a decade in those 12 months. I was 32 but looked 50. "Meredith, I think it's time we consider expanding the search differently." Frank's contacts suggest Ruby was placed through an underground network that specializes in special needs adoptions. These families are often told the birth parents are deceased or unfit. They believe they're saving these children. So what do? We flood the deaf community with her information. We connect with organizations, schools, therapy centers. Someone will have seen her. Deaf children with her specific medical profile aren't common. Someone knows something. I spent the next 4 years doing exactly that. I became obsessed. I joined every deaf community group online and in person. I attended conferences, workshops, school events. I volunteered at deaf schools in 5 different states, always watching, searching. I improved my ASL until I was fluent, earning interpreter certification. I worked for deaf organizations, becoming embedded in the community. I showed Ruby's picture to everyone I met. My family thought I'd lost my mind. "You need to move on," my father said after the 3rd year. "This isn't healthy." "She's alive," I snapped back. "I know she's alive. I'm her mother. I would feel it if she was gone." My mother worried about my mental state. Friends from before Ruby's birth had drifted away. I had no social life, no interest beyond finding my daughter. Every penny I earned went to investigators, to traveling to possible sightings, to printing flyers and maintaining websites. The search consumed me in ways I couldn't have predicted. I created a database of every deaf child enrolled in early intervention programs across 12 states, cross-referencing ages and physical descriptions. Frank helped me access adoption records through legal channels, but so many private placements left no paper trail. I took a job at a deaf advocacy nonprofit in Chicago during year 2 of the search. The pay was terrible, but it gave me access to networks I couldn't reach otherwise. I met parents of deaf children, therapists, educators. I showed Ruby's photo to everyone, explained my situation until my hands ached from signing. Some people were sympathetic, others looked at me like I was unhinged. One woman at a deaf community picnic actually told me, "Maybe she's better off where she is. You seem obsessed." I wanted to scream at her that of course I was obsessed. Someone had stolen my child. But I'd learned to keep my emotions contained around strangers. Breaking down publicly only made people doubt my stability, which could hurt my case if Ruby was ever found. The false leads were the worst part. Someone would call saying they'd seen a deaf toddler who looked like Ruby's picture at a grocery store in Michigan. I'd drive 8 hours, stake out the location for days, only to discover the child had darker skin and was 3 years older than Ruby would be. Another time, a teacher contacted me about a student at a deaf school in Ohio. The age was right. The timeline matched. I flew out the next day, my heart hammering against my ribs. But the moment I saw the girl, I knew. She had red hair and green eyes, nothing like Ruby's features. Each false lead felt like losing her all over again. My apartment became a command center. One wall was covered in maps with pins marking possible sightings, adoption agencies Constance might have used, deaf schools, and programs. Another wall held Ruby's progression photos, what she looked like at birth, computer-generated images of what she might look like at 2, 3, 4 years old. I barely slept. When I did, nightmares plagued me. Ruby crying for me, unable to understand why I'd abandoned her. Ruby being mistreated by people who didn't know how to communicate with her. Ruby forgetting my face entirely. Nathaniel checked on me regularly, worried I was spiraling. "Meredith, you need to take care of yourself. You're no good to Ruby if you collapse from exhaustion." But how could I rest when my daughter was out there somewhere? During year 3, I hit my lowest point. I'd spent every dollar I had on the search. My credit cards were maxed out. I was living on ramen and working 3 jobs, the nonprofit position, weekend interpreting gigs, and overnight data entry work I could do from home. My brother Austin came to visit and was horrified by the state of my apartment. "Sis, this is insane. Look at yourself. You've lost 30 pounds. You look sick. Ruby wouldn't want this for you. Ruby is 2 years old." I snapped. "She doesn't want anything except her mother, who was stolen from her." He left upset, and we didn't speak for 6 months after that. The only person who truly understood was a woman I met at a support group for parents of missing children. Her name was Monica, and her son had been taken by her ex-husband 7 years earlier in a custody dispute. She'd eventually found him in Mexico, but it took 5 years and nearly destroyed her. People who haven't lived it can't comprehend the specific hell of not knowing where your child is, she told me over coffee one afternoon. They think you should move on, grieve, accept. But your child isn't dead. They're just lost. And as long as they're lost, you keep searching. Monica became my anchor during the darkest times. She understood why I couldn't date, couldn't focus on career advancement, couldn't care about anything except finding Ruby. She never told me to move on or called my dedication unhealthy. In year 4, I made a breakthrough that nearly shattered me. Frank's contacts uncovered records from a now-closed adoption facilitator called Blessed Beginnings Family Services. The organization had operated in Pennsylvania and Vermont, placing special needs children with families who specifically requested them. The records were incomplete. The company had destroyed most documents before shutting down amid fraud investigations. But there were fragments, and in one fragment, a handwritten note mentioned, infant female, hearing impaired, placed March 2019. The timing matched perfectly with when Ruby was taken. Frank and I tracked down the woman who had run Blessed Beginnings, Judith Hammond, now 70 years old and living in a nursing home in Vermont. She'd had a stroke, and her memory was spotty, but she agreed to speak with me. I helped children, she insisted, her words slightly slurred. Children who needed special homes. Parents who couldn't cope. Did you work with a woman named Constance Wallace? I showed her a photo. Judith's eyes flickered with recognition. Maybe. I worked with many people. She brought you a deaf baby. My baby? In February 2019. Please, if you remember anything about where that baby went, I placed many deaf children. There was a couple in Washington. Both deaf themselves. They desperately wanted a deaf baby so the child would grow up in deaf culture, not treated as disabled. She paused, struggling to remember. The woman's name started with B. Barbara? Beverly? Bethany? Maybe, I whispered, hope seizing me. I don't remember. But they were good people. I made sure of that. Whatever people say about my business, I vetted families carefully. It was the first solid lead in 4 years. Washington State. A deaf couple. A woman whose name might start with B. Frank immediately began searching deaf community organizations in Washington. The deaf community there was large, but tight-knit. Someone would know this couple. It took 8 more months of networking, attending events, building relationships, before Diana White contacted me. 8 months of hope and terror warring inside me constantly. I'd almost given up dozens of times during those years. Late at night, exhausted and broke and alone, I'd think, maybe everyone was right. Maybe I should accept that Ruby was gone, try to build a new life. But then I'd see a little girl with curly hair at the grocery store, or I'd wake from a dream where Ruby was calling for me, and the determination would surge back fiercer than before. Travis remarried during this time, had a son with his new wife, Kelsey, a perfectly hearing child they paraded on social media. He'd completely moved on, as if Ruby had never existed. Constance got out of prison after 9 months, immediately hired an expensive lawyer, and began rebuilding her reputation. She gave interviews claiming she'd made a difficult decision out of love, painting herself as the victim of a vindictive ex-daughter-in-law. I stopped following the news about them. They didn't matter. Only Ruby mattered. 5 years after she disappeared, I was working as an ASL interpreter at a deaf school in Oregon. I'd moved there 6 months earlier, following a lead that went nowhere, but stayed because the deaf community was strong, and I felt closer to Ruby somehow. It was a Tuesday morning, sunny and warm. I was interpreting for a parent-teacher conference when the school's secretary interrupted. Meredith, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. The woman waiting in the office was about 60, Native American, with silver-streaked black hair and turquoise jewelry. Her name was Diana White, and she was a social worker for the deaf community. I've been following your search for 5 years, she said without preamble. I have information about your daughter. My legs nearly gave out. You've seen her. I believe so. There's a family in Washington State, about 3 hours from here. They adopted a deaf girl 6 years ago through a private agency. The timeline matches. The medical profile matches. They named her Grace. Can you take me to her? Diana hesitated. It's complicated. This family, the Thurstons, they believe the mother died in childbirth. They were told it was a tragic situation, that the father couldn't cope. They've been raising Grace believing they saved her from foster care. So they were lied to, too. But that doesn't change the fact that she's my daughter. I know. But legally, this is going to be messy. The adoption went through a now-defunct agency. The paperwork appears legitimate on the surface. You're going to need lawyers, DNA tests, proof. And Meredith, you're going to potentially traumatize a 6-year-old child who knows the Thurstons as her parents. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to breathe through the overwhelming emotions. Does she look happy? She seems well cared for. The Thurstons are deaf themselves. That's why they specifically wanted to adopt a deaf child. They're active in the community, good people from what I can tell. But that doesn't change what was stolen from you. I need to see her. Even if it's from a distance, I need to see my daughter. Diana drove me to a suburb outside Seattle 3 days later. She'd arranged for us to observe a deaf children's playgroup that Grace attended. We sat in my rental car across the street from the community center, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the binoculars. There, Diana pointed. The little girl in the purple dress. I looked, and my heart stopped. She was 6 years old, tall for her age, with light brown skin and dark curly hair in 2 puffs. She had my nose, Travis's chin, my mother's eyes. She was beautiful and animated, signing rapidly with other children, laughing silently at something another girl communicated. My baby, my Ruby, alive and apparently thriving. The Thurstons arrived to pick her up. Bethany and Marcus, both in their 40s, both deaf. They signed with Grace lovingly, Bethany fixing her daughter's hair, Marcus swinging her up onto his shoulders. Grace's face lit up with pure joy. I watched my daughter leave with another family, and something inside me broke and healed simultaneously. She was alive. She was loved. But she was stolen from me. Nathaniel filed the legal paperwork within a week. DNA tests confirmed what I already knew. Grace Thurston was Ruby Mae Wallace. The case exploded in the media. Nathaniel used the publicity strategically, building public pressure. The Thurstons were devastated. Through their lawyer and interpreter, they released a statement claiming they'd adopted through legitimate channels and had no idea about the kidnapping. They fought the initial ruling, terrified of losing the daughter they'd raised for 5 years. The judge ordered a gradual reunification. Grace, and yes, I had to call her Grace now because that's who she knew herself to be, was introduced to me through supervised visits. She was told I was a friend of her parents, someone who wanted to spend time with her. Those first visits were torture. She signed politely, but clearly wanted nothing to do with me. Why would she? I was a stranger disrupting her life. Bethany and Marcus attended the visits, their faces etched with pain. The pain in Bethany's eyes mirrored my own. 3 months into reunification, the therapist recommended we tell Grace the truth. She was 6 years old, bright and perceptive. She knew something was wrong. Bethany insisted on being the one to tell her. We sat together, me, Bethany, Marcus, Grace, and 2 therapists. Bethany signed slowly, carefully. Grace, we need to tell you something very important. When you were a baby, before you came to live with us, something happened that wasn't right. This woman, Meredith, is actually your birth mother. You grew inside her body. She loved you so much, but someone took you away from her. That was wrong. We didn't know this happened. We thought your birth mother had died. Grace's face crumpled. She looked at me, then at Bethany, confusion and fear swirling in her expression. She signed frantically, "You're not my mom." Bethany's hands trembled. "I've been your mom for 5 years. I love you so much. But Meredith is your mother, too. She's been looking for you since you were a baby. She never stopped." Grace turned to me, her eyes huge. "Why didn't you find me?" The question devastated me. Through the interpreter and in my own signing, I told her I tried every single day. I never gave up. There hasn't been one day I didn't think about you. Miss you. Love you. I'm so sorry it took so long. She started crying, and my instinct was to comfort her, but she turned to Bethany, burying her face in her adoptive mother's shoulder. Bethany held her, tears streaming down her own face, and looked at me with an expression that held no anger, only shared grief. The reunification process took 2 more years. I had to go slowly, building trust with a child who saw me as a threat to her family. Therapy, supervised visits, overnight stays, weekend trips. Grace was 8 years old before she could spend a week with me without crying for Bethany every night. Those 2 years tested every ounce of patience I possessed. The therapist, Dr. Karen Rodriguez, specialized in adoption, trauma, and attachment. She explained that Grace's entire identity had been appended. The parents she trusted completely had kept a massive secret from her. The stranger, claiming to be her real mother, represented loss rather than gain in Grace's mind. "She's grieving," Dr. Rodriguez told me after a particularly difficult session where Grace refused to look at me. "She's grieving the simple story she thought she knew about herself. To accept you means accepting that her life was built on a lie, even if that lie wasn't her parents' fault." The first overnight visit was a disaster. Grace cried for 3 hours straight, signing frantically that she wanted Bethany, that I was mean, that she hated me. I sat outside her bedroom door, my own tears falling silently, feeling like a villain in my daughter's story. Bethany called me that night, her face exhausted in the video chat. "She'll adjust. I keep telling her you're not trying to replace us. That love doesn't run out. But she's 7. She doesn't understand yet." "I'm so sorry," I signed and spoke simultaneously. "I'm sorry this is hurting her. I'm sorry it's hurting you." Bethany's expression softened. "I can't imagine what you went through searching for her all those years. And I can't imagine what you're going through now, having found her but not really having her. This situation was cruel to everyone except the people who caused it. We formed an unlikely alliance. Bethany and I, we texted regularly about Grace's preferences, her fears, her small victories. Bethany sent me videos of Grace signing, taught me the specific signs Grace invented for things, explained her daughters, our daughters, quirks and habits. Marcus was more distant, protective of Bethany's pain, but eventually, he warmed up, too. He taught me about deaf culture. From an insider's perspective, explained things I'd missed in my years of study. "You learned ASL as a second language," he signed during one of Grace's soccer games. "But Grace needs you to understand deaf identity, not just deaf communication." He recommended books, introduced me to deaf adults who could mentor Grace, helped me understand the difference between being deaf, when a medical condition, and being deaf, a cultural identity and source of pride. Slowly, painfully slowly, Grace began to thaw toward me. It started with small things. She'd show me a drawing without being prompted. She'd ask me to braid her hair. She'd tell me about something funny that happened at school. 8 months into reunification, she had a nightmare during a weekend visit. I heard her crying and went to her room, expecting her to push me away as usual. Instead, she reached for me, and I held her while she sobbed against my chest. "I dreamed someone took me again," she signed when she'd calmed down. "And nobody could find me this time. That won't happen, I promised. You're safe now. Both your families will always protect you." She looked up at me with those eyes that were so like my mother's. "Do you promise you won't leave?" My heart cracked open. "I will never, ever leave you. I searched for you for 5 years. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you know you're loved." After that night, something shifted. Grace started calling me by a name she'd invented, a sign that combined mother and searcher. It wasn't mom yet, but it was something. The legal process for finalizing custody was complex. Travis's parental rights had been terminated, but the Thurstons' adoption had been based on fraudulent information. Technically, it could be voided entirely, but doing so would traumatize Grace further and punish the Thurstons for crimes they didn't commit. The judge, a woman named Catherine Brennan, had dealt with unusual custody cases before, but admitted ours was unprecedented. During the final hearing, she addressed Grace directly through an interpreter. "Grace, I know this has been very hard for you. The adults in your life are trying to make the best decisions for your future. What would make you feel safest and happiest?" Grace, now 8 years old and more confident than she'd been a year ago, signed clearly. "I want to live with both families. I don't want to choose. They both love me. Is that allowed?" Judge Brennan smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. That's allowed." The custody arrangement she crafted was unconventional, but comprehensive. I had primary physical custody during the school year, since I'd moved to Washington to be near Grace. Grace spent every other weekend with the Thurstons, plus extended time during summer and all major holidays. Both families had equal decision-making authority on major issues like education and healthcare. This arrangement requires an extraordinary level of cooperation, Judge Brennan warned us during the final ruling. The moment this becomes about the adults' needs instead of Grace's well-being, I'll revisit custody. Do you all understand? We understood. And somehow, impossibly, we made it work. The first year of the official arrangement was rocky. Grace played us against each other sometimes, as children do. She'd tell Bethany I was too strict, then tell me Bethany let her stay up late. We had to learn to communicate openly, verify stories, present a united front. Holidays were complicated. Whose traditions did we follow? Grace had spent 5 Christmases with the Thurstons, learning their family customs. I wanted to create new traditions with her, but didn't want to erase her history. We compromised constantly. Christmas Eve with one family, Christmas Day with the other, alternating years. Birthdays celebrated twice, once with each family. Spring break split down the middle. My parents struggled to understand the arrangement. So you have custody, but she's gone half the time, my mother asked, confused. She's building a relationship with me while maintaining the relationship with the parents who raised her, I explained. It's not ideal, but it's what Grace needs. My father was more blunt. Those people stole 5 years with your daughter. Why are you being so generous? They didn't steal anything. They were lied to. And they gave Grace something I couldn't have given her. They gave her deaf parents who raised her in deaf culture, who made her proud of who she is instead of seeing her deafness as something to fix. It was true. If I'd raised Ruby from birth, would I have done as well as the Thurstons? I'd have loved her fiercely, yes. But I was hearing. I'd have always been an outsider to a fundamental part of her identity. The Thurstons gave her something I never could, the experience of having parents who shared her deafness, who navigated the world the same way she did. That realization helped me accept the shared custody with less bitterness. Yes, they'd had years with her that should have been mine. But those years hadn't been wasted. Grace had thrived. The final custody arrangement was unconventional. I had primary physical custody during the school year, but Grace spent summers and holidays with the Thurstons. The judge called it recognizing the reality of psychological parentage while restoring biological family connections. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. Grace struggled with a divided loyalty. Angry at me for existing. Angry at the Thurstons for not being her real parents. Angry at the universe for making her situation so complicated. But slowly, painfully, we built something. I learned about the child she'd become during those lost years, her love of art, her fascination with marine biology, her wicked sense of humor. She learned about me, my persistence, my love for her that never wavered, the years I spent searching. On her 10th birthday, for years after I found her, she signed something that made me cry for an hour afterward. I have 2 families. One that raised me and one that searched for me. Is it okay to love you both? It's more than okay, I signed back. It means your heart is big enough for all the love you've been given. That makes you extraordinary. Travis never contacted us. His parental rights had been permanently terminated after the kidnapping. His new family existed in a completely different world from ours. Constance died of a heart attack 2 years after I found Ruby. I didn't attend the funeral. I felt nothing at her death except relief that she couldn't hurt my daughter again. The Thurstons and I developed a respectful, if initially awkward, co-parenting relationship. Bethany struggled the most. She'd been Grace's mother for 5 formative years. But she chose Grace's well-being over her own pain, never speaking badly about me, encouraging Grace to build our relationship. Marcus told me once, through an interpreter at one of Grace's school events, what happened to you is evil. What happened to us was devastating. But somehow Grace got 2 families who love her enough to put her first. Maybe that's the only good thing that came from all this pain. He was right. It didn't erase what was stolen. Didn't make the trauma okay. But we were all choosing to move forward, to build something beautiful from the wreckage. Ruby Grace is 14 now. She splits her time between my house and the Thurstons, comfortable in both worlds. She recently decided she wanted to advocate for stricter adoption regulations, using our story to push for reform. She is fierce, brilliant, and determined to make sure no other child is stolen the way she was. Sometimes she calls me Mom, sometimes she calls me Meredith. I answer to both, grateful for any acknowledgement of our relationship. Last week, she showed me an essay she'd written for school about resilience. In it, she described two mothers. One who taught her to sign, to navigate the world as a deaf person, to be proud of her identity. And another who taught her that love means never giving up, that family is worth fighting for, that persistence can overcome impossible odds. You both saved me, she'd written, just in different ways. I thought about that newborn baby in the hospital room, the husband who called her damaged, the mother-in-law who demanded we give her away. I thought about the years of searching, the nights I cried myself to sleep, the moments I almost gave up. Then I looked at the remarkable young woman Grace had become. Proud, strong, unapologetically herself. Travis and Constance thought deafness made her less than. They were so catastrophically wrong. Grace's deafness was simply one part of who she was. And she'd grown up in a deaf family that celebrated, rather than pitted, her, that gave her language and community and pride. The revenge I'd fantasized about during those dark years, seeing Travis and Constance punished, making them suffer as I had suffered, ultimately felt empty. The real triumph was this: Grace thrived. Despite everything, despite the trauma and upheaval and impossible choices, she was okay. More than okay. Travis lived with the knowledge that he'd thrown away his daughter like trash, that she'd become extraordinary without him. Constance died knowing she destroyed lives for nothing, that the child she called damaged was actually perfect. And me? I got my daughter back. Different than I'd imagined. Complicated and messy and shared, but back nonetheless. Some nights, Grace still crawled into bed with me after nightmares about being separated again. I hold her, signing against her back in the dark. I found you. I'll always find you. You're never alone. She'd sign back, I know, Mom. I know. That word, Mom, still made my heart soar every single time. The story could have ended in so many terrible ways, but it ended with Grace, loved by multiple families, confident in her identity, advocating for others, living the full and beautiful life she deserved from the moment she was born. They tried to throw her away because she was different. Instead, she became the center of a complicated, imperfect, but fiercely loving family constellation that refused to let her go. Sometimes justice looks like prison sentences and legal consequences. Sometimes it looks like a 14-year-old girl signing "I love you" to two different mothers and meaning it with her whole heart both times. I'd spent 5 years searching. I'd spend the rest of my life making up for the 5 years we lost. And Grace, brilliant and resilient and holy herself, would spend her life proving that the only damaged thing about our story was the people who thought she was broken in the first place.